I'm Jody.
I'm Gina. Oh,
Kana, you're muted.
Okay, I'm Kana.
And today we're going to be making buttered chickpeas, which is a chickpea version of buttered chicken. I think buttered chicken is really cool just because it was kind of made in like 1948 in Delhi, a region in India, or a city in India. And it was actually made by chance by mixing some leftover chicken with some tomato gravy that had a lot of butter and cream. So this one is a little bit less dairy. It can be no dairy or a little dairy. You can use butter or some butter alternative, but the creaminess really comes from the coconut milk. And I don't have all of the ingredients because I did sprain my ankle. So you might kind of see me hobbling around a bit, but I only have 1 can of chickpeas. So my ratio is going to be a little bit off, but I'm going to hopefully get another can of chickpeas later. But we can start by I'm going to start the rice. So it's going to be 2 cups of brown rice dried and 4 cups of water to a saucepan. And while I'm starting my rice, I'm wondering if people wanted to go around and share just like how you grew up making rice, what kind of rice you use, do you measure your rice or not? And maybe I can pass it to Jody first.
Yeah, I grew up and we would cook rice in a pot, and it was Uncle Ben's rice. Now I cook all different kinds of rice. I still always have Uncle Ben's as a backup, but I also love jasmine brown rice and I love basmati rice. Mostly the long grain rices, and I don't have a lot of experience with any other grains, even though obviously there are the medium and short grain rices too. Kana?
Yep. My family usually eats white short grain rice, and sometimes we use the brown rice. And when we use brown rice, we don't make all the brown rice, but our ratio is like half white rice and half brown rice, and we mix together so that it's not, sometimes it's too hard if it's not cooked well. So it's very good balance if you mix together. Yeah. How about Gina?
Yeah, I think just jasmine rice, white jasmine rice has been kind of a huge staple in my family for a very long time. So I'm really used to eating that, and we typically make it in a rice cooker. So, and we measured it with your finger. It's just to like measure it, and it's just to cover your first knuckle or something like that. Yeah, and honestly, like I helped my family. That was like my chore for the family for a while. But I honestly don't remember how to actually make rice without using a measuring cup. So right now, I still do the same thing where I wash the rice and like drain it until it's almost kind of clear. And I put it in a rice cooker, but I still have to measure out how much rice to how much water now. I'm not that good for feeling it out. Yeah.
My family, I only really grew up eating the like kind of boxed rice with the packet of flavoring in it. And I wasn't always a super huge fan of it. It was just so salty. But I would say now I usually make brown rice or white rice. And I kind of do like a combo of what you all do. I usually just eyeball it. And I'll put some rice in. I just use my heart to decide how much. And then I'll usually kind of rinse it off. And then I'll put some water on it just to make sure it's covered by like at least an inch, and I'll bring it to a boil, and then I'll turn the heat down. I have toasted my rice before, which was pretty cool. And it kind of gave like a different flavor. But usually I just boil it. We are using brown rice today because it's a whole grain. So in our class next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about whole grains. But for now, I will just leave you with the information that whole grains are a little bit higher in some nutrients, especially in fiber. And they're grains with like the whole grain intact. So they've got the bran, the outer part, and the endosperm and the germ. Whereas a refined grain like white rice or like refined flour or things like that is mostly just the endosperm. So you're not getting as much fiber and as much as the like vitamins in there too. And we'll talk about in class how to know if a grain is a whole grain. But for now, I am going to start. I washed my cans ahead of time and I rinsed my produce just because so many things are touched before they come to us. And so just making sure those are clean. I'm going to go over how to dice the onion, mince the garlic, and grate the ginger. But I'm wondering first, before I do that, if Kana is able to share a little bit about how to read a recipe.
Okay. So about how to read a recipe, if you guys have this handout in your pockets, you can also see this handout. And do you guys look at the recipe when you cook? Look at the recipe or no? Yeah. Oh, in the middle. Yeah. It's good when you cook something new, huh? Because you don't know what kind of taste it should be. But the recipe is usually help you to create the dish, the consistency. But this is not, professional cooking class. So you can always modify the recipe. Like if you like cilantro today, you can add more cilantro. Or if you don't like cilantro, you don't have to add cilantro. Or if you like garlic, then you can add more garlic. And if you don't like garlic, you can reduce the amount of garlic, right? Okay, then let's look at the recipe today. Butter chickpea. There is a recipe here. What do you usually look at the recipe first? There's a name of dish, and also there's a let's see. Like prep time, cooking time, total time, and yield. So when you cook recipe, you have to always check out the time if you have enough time today to cook this one. And also the yield. This one is 6 servings of 1.5 cups. But if you are just like living by yourself and you don't need this much, then you can also reduce in half. Or if you want more and store in the fridge or something like that, then you can double the recipe too. And let's read through the recipe one time from the top. And then after the cooking time, then there's ingredients. And then you can check the ingredients, lead through, then you can see what kind of ingredients you need. And the amount of ingredients is also important. If you don't have the ingredients, and you can go to buy, or if you don't have but you want to cook right now, then you can think about like what you can substitute these ingredients for. I usually look up online and like when I don't have baking soda, then I can mix with baking powder and like cream of tartar like that. You can also find probably something online. And
yeah,
then,
if you feel comfortable with the internet is definitely your friend for finding substitutions for things. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
I have substitutions I want to share. Okay. I left a paprika in my car. It's a little too far for me to get right now. So I'm just gonna up the ante on cayenne. Yeah. And what else is there? I don't have cinnamon, but I have nutmeg. So hopefully that's okay.
And so the garam masala, which is one of the spices that we're using today, is a blend, and there is cinnamon in there, and there might be paprika in there. I'm not sure, but so yeah, I think if you have a blend of something, or if you have a similar flavor, that can be really good.
I do have this. So.
Yeah. Or if you had a curry powder, that would be probably delicious as well. If you didn't have the garam masala.
Yeah. So those are my substitutions.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I'm gonna start chopping the onion now. I'm seated because of my ankle injury, but I just realized that I went a little out of order. But then we can talk more about reading a recipe. I just want to make sure this starts up a little bit sooner. So I just cut my onion in half. I probably should have described that. And like I said before, we wash our onions, we wash our produce ahead of time and the tops of our cans ahead of time, just to make sure that whatever, like whoever's touched it or anything, like there's always just bacteria. So just making sure we can get some of that off. And even though we peel the skin off of our onions, we want to make sure still to wash it because it's something we're putting on our cutting board and our knife is going through it. So just trying to cut some of that bacteria out. So usually once I cut it in half, and if you haven't washed your cans yet or your produce, you're welcome to do that right now. I usually then go to kind of peel this off. And there's so many ways to cut an onion. This is just kind of my way. Is I like to keep this root part intact, just to keep it all together, but I cut off the other end. And it's best to use a pretty sharp knife because onions can really make you cry. And you might see me cry a lot while demoing this. But I kind of use my knife a little bit like to cut along these lines. And so I'll do that. Can you remind me, Kana, does the recipe say to chop them or dice them?
Let me see. The onion is dicing.
Okay. I didn't really read it ahead of time, but I think this will be fine. I just like with this one, I want it to be kind of bite-sized pieces. So once I go through that this way, I'm going to start cutting it this way. And so you can kind of see I'm going to keep my fingers out of the way and I'm holding my knife by pinching the blade. It's a little bit more stable for me, but you can also hold it back here. You just don't want to hold it too far back or like this is a little bit less stable. So this is usually the most stable. And we're going to cook these onions until they're clear, which is maybe like 6 or 7 minutes. In some, I'm going to use some butter alternative because I can't eat a lot of dairy, but we'll do that. We're going to use some garlic too. And so does anyone have any tips for how to get the skin off garlic that they like?
I usually crush them with the like stones.
With the stones?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, I'm already starting to cry. Yeah, you can crush it with anything. I'm going to crush mine with my knife. You want to make sure that the sharp part is facing away, but if you have something like a mortar and a pestle or anything kind of blunt, it'll get that paper off. And my garlic is sprouting a little bit, but I'm going to eat it anyway. I'll cut off kind of the like rough part. And then I'm going to kind of go in little cuts back and forth over this. And I'm starting to cry a lot, so I'm going to take a pause. But I'm going to get the onion in the pan right now. I'm going to heat the pot over medium heat, and you'll see that on the other camera. I'm going to melt the butter or the butter alternative. Once it's hot, I'm going to stir in the onion and a half teaspoon of salt and cook till it's golden brown around the edges for around 20 minutes. But for the sake of time, I might just cook it for less time. It's kind of, every recipe is kind of an experiment. So I will pass it back to Kana and see if she has any other recipe tips.
Okay. So I think we go over the ingredients. So the next is instructions right now. Shana and Gina is cutting. And there's a
Yeah. Tears are coming.
dice. Yeah. Dice means in grade ginger and roughly chopped. So you can see how different cutting, how big is the vegetable should be cut. And also today we use the brown rice. And if you want to use the saucepan, then you can just wash and put together with the water. But if you want to use the rice cooker, maybe it might be better to soak the brown rice ahead. Then you can put and then cook rice. So depending on the instruction, you may have to prepare ahead of the time. Like you may need to soak the beans the night before, or you may have to take out the butter like 30 minutes before you start to cook. So you need to check those stuff, pre-preparations. Okay, and other stuff is, this is not on the list, but by reading the instruction, you can see what kind of tools or equipment you need to use. And if you don't have that equipment, you will see what you can use instead of those ones on the listed. Okay, and one thing I want to mention about is when you are looking at ingredients, there is one, let me see, the first one is 1 TBSP, and another one, it says 1.5 TSP. This one looks very similar, but it's actually different because the first one is tablespoon and the second one is teaspoon, and this is a different measurement. So when you read the ingredients, you may need to be very careful because if you add too much salt, it might be too salty. So yeah, you have to be careful about reading the amount of ingredients here.
I've definitely mixed up the teaspoons and tablespoons before.
Yeah.
And I've also definitely mixed up, like you were saying, you had a really good point of reading it through ahead of time just to make sure you know all the steps. Like there's a lot of things I've made where it's like, and then put the dough in the refrigerator for 2 hours.
Yeah,
like,
I
did not know I needed to do this because I don't read the recipes through.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten a little bit better.
That happens, yes.
I am just going to draw your attention for a moment. I'm peeling the ginger with this spoon because I find it's a little bit easier than using a peeler. You're welcome to use that tip, or you can continue using a peeler, or you just can leave it unpeeled because the skin is fine to eat. It's just a little bit like rougher, but just some hot ginger tips. Also, if you put it in the freezer, it's a lot easier to grate because it's so much harder. How much garlic again? What did you say, Gina? How much garlic again? I can't hear you. Can you say it one more time?
How much garlic again?
Oh, the recipe says 4 cloves. But as one of my friends says, you measure garlic with your heart. So if you need more than that, go for it. If you need less, go for it. I'll be putting in around a 5 because my cloves are a little small.
And how much ginger?
The ginger, it says a tablespoon of fresh ginger, grated. Okay. So I'm using around, this is not super exact, but I'm going to use like around this much. Okay. So all of this stuff is kind of like just working in ratios, right? So working in like, what do you like? Like if you're a ginger enthusiast, maybe you put in more ginger, and maybe you can't eat as much garlic, you can put less garlic. Or like Gina mentioned, or maybe someone else mentioned, with like spiciness, you can add as much or as little as you want. So recipe is just kind of like a guideline. I'm gonna check if my butter is hot enough. Oh, I guess I can see it in my stovetop camera. That's fun. It doesn't look hot enough yet because it's not as, the stove, oil is usually hot enough when it kind of gets a little bit like looser. It almost behaves like water. But I will check mine in a moment. Is yours similar, Gina?
I have not started yet.
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
I missed that point apparently.
Oh.
How much butter?
So it is 4 tablespoons unsalted butter or butter alternative.
Okay, 4 tablespoons.
And butter and butter alternatives are saturated fats. They're usually solid at room temperature, which means they're the kind that we want to eat more in moderation. But in this recipe, there's a little bit more unsaturated fat with the butter or butter alternative in the coconut milk, but there's a little bit less because the protein is the chickpeas instead of more like a meat protein, which might have more saturated fat. So it's kind of like a give and take a little bit.
Start on medium heat?
Pardon?
Do I start on medium heat?
It's medium heat. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so I'll put my onions in a moment. But I'm wondering, Kana, if you're able to share an anything about like smoke points. Like, how do I know if what oil's the right one for me?
Okay. By the way, how do you guys know it's hot enough to start to cook on the oil?
Yeah, that's one way that I check.
Wow. How about Jody?
Sometimes you can hear it because it will start sizzling in the pan.
Hmm.
So that's one way that I, especially if I have to turn my back for a minute from the stove, it'll remind me.
Do you guys like put your hands on top of the like pans and feel if it's hot?
Yeah, I do that sometimes. I feel for the heat.
Yeah, there's a lot of way to know if it's hot enough, but whatever way you use, you don't want to miss that time, because if the pan is too hot and the oil become too hot, then it leaches the oil smoke points, and which is actually start to make the smokes, and also it makes like food burn flavors. So you want to avoid it. It's become too hot. Like if you have these handouts in the pocket, you can also look at this one. So the smoke point is, once again, smoke point is the temperature at which oil starts to burn and smoke. So if oil that reach these smoke points, then oil flavor is gone and become burnt and smell taste. And also beneficial nutrients like phytochemicals is also gone. It's burned out. And also it can be carcinogenic, which means it can cause cancers too. So you want to avoid oil reaching the smoke points. And how can you do that? Then one way is like you feel it, whatever way you do. And another one is there's a lot of different oil types in the supermarket if you go. Then these oils have different smoke points actually. And depending on whatever method you use to cook, like deep frying or frying in the high heat or boiling, you can choose the proper oil, the appropriate oil, so that it doesn't burn too much. Like today, I think we're going to use the butter. And if you look at the butter, this is actually categorized at the low heat oils.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't put too much heat, like don't put the high heat, because it's gonna burn out and start to smell too burnt and taste burnt too. But instead, if you want to heat it up so high, then you can use like there's avocado oil or peanut oil, sunflower oil, almond oil, vegetable oil. Those are good for the highest heat oils.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I usually use like vegetable oil for like deep frying because it's good for the high heat oil. And if I accidentally use like olive oils for like frying like sunny side up, and I want to make it a little bit burn, then it can be like smoke and very stinky in my house. So yeah, you
Yeah,
should
if
be
you're
careful.
like me and you get impatient and you just want to turn your heat up, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because of what Kana is saying, it's not good for the oils to be heated up. But so if you're impatient, just try to resist the temptation to turn the heat up to medium high. You want to keep it on medium or medium low. But I know that sometimes it's tempting to be like, I don't have time for this. Like I'm going to crank it up, but you just want to be careful with your oils.
What kind of oil are you guys use at home?
I usually use like sunflower oil. It's like one of the cheaper higher heat oils that I've seen for like when I'm cooking. But I usually use like if I'm using something that I'm not cooking, I'll use like olive oil. If I'm using something I'm cooking it really high, I'll use like canola oil.
Oh, canola oil, yeah.
Yeah, classic. I am currently using canola oil as my high heat, but for me, Grocery Outlet often has avocado oil for pretty cheap, and that's pretty high up on the smoke point chart. So sometimes that, but not right
Interesting.
now. Right now I have canola.
Interesting. I also have sesame oil to flavor like food. I really like sesame oil that
Yes.
tastes and smells.
Yeah. I think sesame oil and white pepper go in everything for me.
Mhm. So right now you guys are using butter, right?
Okay. So Shayna, what do I do after my oil is heated up?
After your oil is heated up and it's ready, you can test it. I put like 1 piece of onion in just to make sure it was hot enough. And if it kind of sizzles around it, put the rest of the onion in. The recipe says to cook the onions for 20 minutes. I don't actually remember when I put them in, but that would be good to know. I probably should have set a timer. But I'm gonna actually add the garlic and the ginger probably pretty soon. And then I'm gonna cook it for 1 minute more and then add all the spices. And then I'll add everything else except for the chickpeas and cook it for like 10 minutes. So yeah, if your pan is hot, it's gonna be onions. The recipe says 20, I would say at least 10 is probably a good call. And then adding in your garlic and ginger. So a lot of people will add garlic pretty early, which you totally can do, but it's pretty easy for garlic to burn. So we added in a little bit after the onion. And so one cool thing about this recipe is that it's a pretty good pantry meal. So everyone's pantry is completely different, and we'll talk about that in class in a couple weeks. But a lot of these things are things that I actually already had in my pantry. I injured my ankle, so I wasn't able to run to the store this week. But there were things that I already had. So if these are pantry items for you, this could be a really good pantry meal. A lot of the things are just shelf stable. So there's not too much that you would need to get fresh. I guess just the cilantro if you're using it. And I'm gonna put my garlic and ginger in. I wondered, Gina, if you'd be able to share about like the concept of aromatics.
Yeah. I guess like, yeah, so we spent a few minutes now just kind of talking about oils, onions, ginger, and garlic. And one of the things about a lot of the recipes that we share is that they have a lot of these ginger, garlic. We have an emphasis on the oils and spices. So this recipe has a lot of spices too, because we like to make the emphasis of using aromatics to flavor your food, erring on using all those pieces I just listed, spices, garlic, ginger, and certain vegetables and oils to flavor your food instead of using salt. Salt is a great way to flavor food. Salt is a flavor enhancer. Its sole purpose is to flavor things. However, high salt does cause some chronic health issues. And if you already have some chronic health issues, and you're looking to reduce salt, learning how to use aromatics is a great way to keep foods healthy and delicious for you. Yeah, and a great way to make sure you get a lot of flavor out of your spices and your aromatics is to kind of toast them, cook them in oil. Sometimes we call this blooming spices. So right now we're just kind of, I think we're caramelizing onions a bit, depending on how long you leave onions in the pan. You either are caramelizing them or just kind of sweating them. Yeah, these are all methods that I just named of how to get flavor to come out of your aromatics. Yeah. So yeah, so we have a lot of use of aromatics in this recipe. You can see Shanna's adding some spices. So right now for Shanna, her onions are she's cooked out a lot of the flavor. So it's in the food. I was going to say it's in the food. Anyways, she's adding spices too. So right now she's really focusing on her aromatics and cooking those up.
Yeah, I really want to smell those.
It smells great. I'll just describe it to you. It's sweet, it's spicy, it's buttery. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add my ginger and garlic as well now. So what do I do after ginger and garlic? Kind of, are you? I don't have the recipe in front of
After
me.
the ginger and garlic, you want to cook it for 1 minute and then add all the spices and cook 1 more minute.
Okay.
And then you'll add the canned tomatoes.
Okay.
So the recipe includes either a cinnamon stick or some ground cinnamon. So the original recipe that this is from has a cinnamon stick, but because that can be kind of hard to find sometimes and it's a little bit more expensive, we're going to sub out some ground cinnamon. You may have noticed also that I didn't add a full 2 teaspoons to my recipe. And it's just because I have a little bit less of the chickpeas. So I'm just adjusting a little bit so that it's not too seasoned, but I might make some edits once I taste it. I am going to add the canned tomatoes now. It's the canned tomatoes and the liquid that they come in. And if they're kind of chunky, you can kind of break them up with a spoon. And I am wondering, if anyone here has experience with growing herbs, like growing cilantro or anything they would want to share.
I actually have never done. I tried one time, like I forget the name. Like Vietnamese, I forget the name, but it it grows too much in the. I was planting in the planter, and I put a lot of seeds actually into it, and it grows too much, and I
It
cannot
grows
handle
tall
it.
pretty fast too.
Yes, it's pretty.
It's very like
fast, and
leggy.
yeah, then I have to discard it. So I want to try it. Yeah, to grow something this summer.
Yeah, there's so cilantro is one of the herbs that like has a tendency to like bolt, which means it like grows tall before it grows a lot of leaves. And because what we're looking for is the leaves, you want to try to like cut off some of the flowers of it, but it can be just hard because when it gets too hot, it'll bolt up. There are some slow bolting cilantro like seeds that you can try. But if it does flower and it does turn into a seed, the seed of cilantro is coriander. So you can also use that to flavor your food too.
I didn't know that.
Jody, do you want to share some of your like cool science facts about cilantro taste?
Yeah. So with cilantro, some people the taste of it tastes soapy to them, so they don't enjoy it as much as the people who don't taste the soapy taste. I feel lucky that I don't taste the soap. What about everybody else?
Yes, thankfully I do not taste too much soap. I taste a little bit, but it's still delicious to me.
I do not taste soapy either. But when I was younger, I didn't like it though. Then recently I started to like it. I don't know why. What changes me?
Definitely, I think that our taste buds change over time. And so if you think, oh, I don't like that food, then it's always good to give it another shot because you might have developed new tastes and you might enjoy it. So it's always good to try things a second or a third time, especially if it has been a while since you tasted it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Our preference changes.
It's true. Yeah. As you get older.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I just added the spices and it smells amazing. It's like everything else. Oh, can't wait.
Come on. What did you add, Shanna? something white she added.
Yeah.
I just
Was it
added
the coconut
the
milk?
canned tomatoes and the coconut milk. And so
Oh, coconut milk. Okay.
the fat separates from the liquid. And so when you open it, sometimes it's just a layer of fat. And you have to like break through it to let the liquid out and then scoop out the fat. But it's really easy to like squirt yourself in the face with it. So just be careful when you're opening it. And we talk a lot about knife safety, but one thing that is also sharp that we work with in the kitchen is the outside of cans once we open them. So just if you have a lot of cans around, being careful, and especially if you're cooking with kids, just making sure that they don't have their fingers in the cans, because they can definitely lead to a bad time. I think that we're almost done. So it says to bring to a simmer and cook for 10 minutes, stirring occasionally. And again, since we're kind of going a little rogue, I might cook it for less time. Who knows? Just because I know we've been on for a little bit, but the next thing we're going to do afterwards is stir in the chickpeas and some of the cayenne pepper. And the reason why we're adding the cayenne last is because sometimes when cayenne pepper is in something that's like stewing for a while, it gets like even spicier. So it's easier to control when you add it a little bit later. But you can always adjust it with how much that you want. If you really like it spicy, add more. If you're not a fan, add less. And then we'll serve it over the rice with the cilantro. So I think what I'm going to do now is open my can of chickpeas and rinse it, just because canned foods can have a lot of added salt. So we usually open them up and rinse them off. And then I'm going to cut my cilantro. Where are you at, Gina?
I am just about to add canned tomatoes. I'm opening all my cans right now. So, because it says with the canned tomatoes, right after that, it looks like you add the coconut milk. So
exactly.
Already.
It's 2 cans of tomatoes, 1 can of coconut milk, and 2 cans of chickpeas, unless you only have 1 like I do. Cool.
Jana, it looks like for your rice that there's not a lid on it, or maybe the lid is clear and that's why it looks like I can see into your pot. Do you have a clear lid on your rice?
You know what? I don't have a lid for this one, so I just didn't put one on. But usually when you cook brown rice, I have a different pot that I usually use that has a lid. But I actually don't know where it is. It's usually just hanging from our pot rack, but I'm using a much smaller pot. Huh?
You put a plate?
Yeah, I can definitely put a plate. It can be good to keep in some of the moisture with the lid. But you know, I'm not a conventional rice cooker. I feel like I break a lot of the rules. I stir it. I don't know. I've been told that I'm rogue, so don't necessarily follow my rice advice. Okay, I'm gonna
Does it
go.
still turn out delicious? Does it still turn out delicious for you?
It's never been a problem for me, so I just kind of keep going that way. But I should ask some of the people that I cook food for, see what they think. I'm going to add or rinse the chickpeas and get the cilantro, but I'm wondering in my absence if Kana or Jody or Gina want to share any of your favorite pantry meals.
Does ramen count as a pantry meal?
Sorry, does what?
Ramen.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too.
That is definitely my go-to for quick meals. And I like to add a lot of like frozen vegetables to it. So I have on hand a lot of frozen like corn and spinach, broccoli. Sometimes I throw in some like frozen shrimp. Yeah, so those are my like go-to like really fast like pantry meals. Noodles.
Yeah, me too. I actually eat noodles a lot, like ramen, udon, soba, those kind of dried noodle. And I put like vegetables and like shrimp. Yeah, I sometimes deep fry shrimp, then put on the noodles. Then sometimes use tofu, deep fry tofu, and put on top of the noodles. And yeah, that's the probably easiest stuff I may make from the pantry food.
Yeah, I also love noodles. I like to do a quick pasta that is like spaghetti noodles and then a can of tomatoes with some onion and garlic and some oregano, and you cook the tomato with the garlic and the onions and the oregano, and it gives you a super fast sauce to put on your spaghetti and have dinner on the table in 20 minutes.
Yeah, anything that involves like canned beans is like super easy to make. So there are a lot of stews, a lot of tomato soups out there that are go-to favorite. I can't name any specifically, but they involve beans and tomatoes, kind of like this recipe.
All right, so I just wanted to grab my cilantro because I feel like I have an exciting hot tip. And while I'm waiting for my stovetop chana sog to finish cooking, I will show you how I usually cut my cilantro. So I already washed this, but I like to use my really sharp knife and actually like kind of shave it off. So you can definitely pick it like leaf by leaf, but I just feel like it's so tedious that I usually just try to do it this way.
And you can use the stems of the cilantro too.
Definitely. And I think this recipe actually specifically says to. But if you're using an herb that you aren't going to use the stems of, it can be a good way to do that too. But yeah, almost all stems of like the softer herbs, so like cilantro or parsley or basil, are totally fine to eat. The only ones that are like just a little bit less fun to eat would be like thyme or rosemary or sometimes oregano or marjoram when it's like a little bit woodier. But those are really good to use for like stocks or making your own broth or something like that.
Okay. How much cilantro again? I'm about to cut mine up too.
It says a half cup of cilantro leaves and stems.
Okay.
So I guess mine's actually around that.
All right. Got it.
My stovetop heat is not very predictable, so
I don't know. Electric?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
How's yours looking, Gina?
Bubbly.
Nice. Mine's
it's simmering.
I turned the heat up now that it's not just butter in there, but I feel like it's still going kind of slow, so I'm gonna turn it up a little bit more.
Yeah. I am on the, yeah. I added the coconut, I've added and I'm simmering and it says simmer for 10 minutes. So like 5 minutes in, I think. Preparing the cilantro.
I wonder, for the sake of time, I might plate mine and try it now just to see. I'm gonna try it.
And sometimes too, with recipes like this, if you make it ahead and it sits, it can taste better too. So you don't have to feel like you have to make it and eat it right away. If you have time earlier in the day, you could make it maybe and then eat it later. And then when the ingredients sit together, it works better.
Great tip. Thank you. Because I was hoping to hold on to this until dinner time.
I always love leftovers.
Mm-hmm.
They always have that.
I'm also going to not chop
Looks
up all cilantro. What is that? Ooh, pretty.
That's the rice, and then you kind of spoon the butter chickpeas over, and then you can add some cilantro.
Looks delicious.
That's good.
Nice.
I think
I'm
it all needs
hungry
more
again
cheese.
now.
What do you say, Gina? Or kind
I'll take your word for it.
I think just because it's 2:20ish, we can probably end now, but definitely really excited to keep cooking with you all together. And please join us next week as we cook together our fried rice. Yes. And that's another really good recipe for leftover rice. This recipe, you definitely can use leftover rice, and it's a great way to use it up, but that one is actually even better with leftover rice. It's a little bit dried out. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Shana. Thank you, Kana. Thank you, Jody.